Violence against the church in America is on the rise. How can you protect your church without turning it into Fort Knox? Well, stay tuned because we're going to talk about that next. Hello, and welcome to the Chaplain's Corner After Hours, a place to discuss stories the mainstream media ignores that can actually impact our Christian walk and our spiritual journey. Chaplain Warren and Chaplain Nan are your hosts, and we're glad to have you with us. Hello, and welcome back to the Chaplain's Corner After Hours. I'm Chaplain Warren.
And I'm Chaplain Nan.
And we're both glad to have you with us here today. Our subject is violence against the church. Now, all Christians know that violence against the church and against Christians is as old as the first day Jesus told the Pharisees and the other Jewish leaders that he was the Son of God, the Messiah. But violence against the church was recently brought front and center into the news. I'm sure you saw that in Minneapolis, City's church was violated by protesters on January 18th. And so before we get into a discussion about this latest invasion of a church, I want to just take a couple of minutes and share some information with you about how common church violence has become in our country, especially in just the last year. So here's a rundown for 2025. On April 3rd, a man allegedly entered St. Peter's and Paul's Catholic Church in Seneca, Oklahoma, and shot the Reverend Aro Casarella, who died at a hospital after that shooting. On May 6th, a man allegedly set an explosive device on the altar inside St. Teresa of Calcutta Adoration Chapel in Manoa City, Pennsylvania, northeast of Harrisburg. And I apologize if I mispronounced that city name. Dominic Lee Wall Stevens, age 45, reportedly set fire to the doors of Sacred Heart Catholic Church in Portland, Oregon on June the 11th. Wall Stevens called 911 to turn himself in for starting the fire, local authorities reported. Church security at Cross Point Community Church in Wayne, Michigan, shot dead a would-be assailant on June 22nd. And on July 27th, a 15-year-old boy allegedly shot and killed another 15-year-old boy at St. Thomas More Catholic Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The suspect will be charged as an adult for the first-degree murder despite his minor status. And then Brian Oviedo, 32, faces charges for setting fire to approximately 20 buildings in Brooklyn, New York, in the early morning hours of August 20th. The buildings include the Church of St. Luke and St. Matthew. And then on August 27th, Robert Westman, 23, opened fire at Annunciation Catholic Church in Minneapolis, Minnesota, killing 2 children and injuring 17 before taking his own life. On September 17th, police in El Paso, Texas, arrested 35-year-old Marnica Marquez and charged her with arson against a place of worship, specifically Bethel Bible Church. On Sunday, September 28th, Thomas Jacob Sanford, 40, drove his truck into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Grand Blanc Township, Michigan, northwest of Detroit. Opening fire and setting the church on fire, he killed 4 people and injured 8 others before dying in an exchange of gunfire with law enforcement. And this list of church invasions doesn't include all the robberies, the vandalism, the desecrations, and other threats to places of worship in 2025. And so, here's the bottom line. As America moves towards regaining some semblance of its Judeo-Christian past under the Trump administration, evil forces are ramping up their efforts to destroy that recovery. And make no mistake, this is not about political opponents having a legitimate difference of opinion. As Benny Johnson remarked recently, and this will be a rough quote of what he said, this is about the left in this country being done with debate and discussion. They just want to kill those who do not agree with them. Do you have any comments on that, Chaplain Nan?
Actually, probably not yet.
Okay. All right. So, as a result of all this, churches all over the country are being targeted as part of their efforts. In addition to this, radical politicians are offering cover to those invading churches in an effort to normalize church invasions. For example, the mayor of Minneapolis recently encouraged more church, quote, protests, unquote. The Minnesota Attorney General declared church invasions are not against state law. And none other than Barack Obama has come out and said there just needs to be more protests in the streets. And so, if you run a church or you attend a church, security is your responsibility. If your church in particular is part of a mainline denomination, don't wait on church leadership to lead the way, because they avoid this topic like the plague. And so, what can you do, and what can your church do to prepare to secure your church against whatever threats may come at you? Well, the first thing I would suggest is to go to YouTube and subscribe to the Christian Warrior Training YouTube channel. And we'll put a link to that channel in our show notes. This YouTube channel is run by Keith Graves, who was a career law enforcement officer. He has tons of information on how to secure your church, but not turn it into a fortress that might keep out people truly seeking Christ. And so I strongly suggest that you don't try to do church security totally on your own without checking out Keith's YouTube channel. And so now let's kind of go back and let's take a look at the church invasion that happened at City's Church in Minneapolis a couple of weeks ago now. And let's do kind of a forensic analysis of what they could have been doing to better protect themselves and what they for sure could have been doing to have a better outcome than the one that was spread across media all around the globe. And so the first thing we need to think about is our threat environment. Take the case of City's Church. They're in the St. Paul, Minneapolis area. Right now, this is literally ground zero for every leftist activist group, including Antifa, Black Lives Matters, and others. And that should have motivated people in the church, I think, to be more mindful of their security. Also, one of the pastors at that church works for ICE. In fact, he was the celebrant at the worship service that was invaded. And folks, I don't think that was a coincidence. The church should have also had better coordinated security. The first line of defense is outside of the church and around the church, scoping out incoming threats. A second line of security should have secured the entrances to the building and should have been ready to lock the front doors if a threat arises. And this second line of security should be the ones who are calling 911 to get the police on the way when a threat is detected. And then a church really needs to have a third line of security that needs to be in the church, ready to protect the pastor, shield the congregation, and limit physical contact between invaders and the congregation. On his YouTube channel, Keith Graves notes over and over and over again the place to shut down trouble is outside the church. Because this is where you either discourage the bad actors or you alert the second line of people to start locking the doors. Now, Jesus told us over and over in Scripture that the world will hate us because it hated him first. And that comes from John 15, verse 18. That hate, in fact, can come at us at work. It can come at us in school. It can come at us while we're out shopping. And, of course, it can come at us where we worship. Jesus also showed us what righteous anger looks like. Hating the sin, but not the sinner. Loving those who invade the church, but hating the sin of what they're doing, because they are created by God. But sometimes the reality is we have to subdue the sinner in the best way that we can in order to protect ourselves and those around us. And so the key to this is to be prepared. And you have to be aware to be prepared. And you have to be proactive to be prepared. But we also have to be ready to share the gospel. Because not everyone who's acting out in an evil way is necessarily evil. Many are just led astray. So I'm going to ask now, do you have anything you want to say or add to that?
So now let's go back to the earlier thing.
Sure.
I think the hardest thing for most people, what happened in Minneapolis, if you don't know the whole context of why the protesters went inside the church during an active service, to me denotes two things. One, stupid people, in the words of somebody we know, stupid people who didn't check out the laws before they marched in that way, because in order to make their point, they broke many federal laws which the Supreme Court has established long, long ago. And that was that it was during an active service.
Right.
It wasn't like the church was empty and they went in there or people were starting to gather. It was in the middle of the actual service. And so our great Constitution, for which many people died to protect our religious freedom, you cannot walk into a place, you cannot interrupt a worship service of any kind of religion for anybody.
Right.
The other thing, and if you haven't watched, check out Megyn Kelly's YouTube. She talks about it. If you don't know Megyn Kelly, she's a real legal eagle. She is an attorney by profession before she became a broadcaster, and she actually clerked for a Supreme Court justice.
Right.
So she really knows her stuff, and not that you take it to the bank, everything's perfect, but anyhow, she made the point that they did two hugely fatal flaws for themselves, which now they, especially the arrest of Don Lemon, is that they entered, and even I didn't know this, a church, a place of worship, is a private property. It's not a public property.
That's a very good point.
And that was surprising to me because I thought, I never thought about it actually till I saw what she was saying about the charges, or why it's, stupid people didn't do their homework before they went in to try and make their point. If their point was not against Christians, their point was against a man who worked for ICE, who happened to be the pastor. Mm-hmm. But that's like a one-off. The main thing was they walked into, so they bombarded, they invaded, they walked into a private property without permission. And that was surprising to me because all the churches I know, the doors open on a Sunday and anybody can walk in. So that was a new thing for me. But because it's a private property, then they didn't have the right to just walk in.
Well, and certainly, like a restaurant, they could be refused service if they don't act properly.
So now we have horrible things happening in liturgical churches, like really sinister, bad things happening with people who are going up to receive the host of Holy Communion. And so now it's so bad that the ushers and people assigned are watching to make sure that people are actually consuming the host, mm-hmm. because they're taking it out to do horrible desecrations in the other evil side's place of where they do their horrible things. So anyhow, it's just devolved. And so I guess my first reaction was, I can't believe this is really happening. Uh-huh. And it kind of reminded me of the first time that we had that terrible, and I don't want to compare the two of what happened in the church to the mass shooting in Colorado in the movie theater. And that was really, next to Columbine shooting, was the first time for me personally that it gave me great pause about going to a movie theater. It gave me great pause about being anywhere where the doors are shut and looking around and wondering, is somebody getting ready to do, and actually having to think through, how am I going to get out and where this person or persons might come from. And that was, I guess, our young children and grandchildren have to think about that every day when they go to school. And mm-hmm. so it's just it's so beyond comprehension that you kind of don't want to think about it. As you were saying, a lot of church leaders, they just want to not talk about it. And I think that's partly it. It's like to accept that that's your reality now. So if you talk to a principal, that's their reality. They're used to it now. It's a horrible thing to have to accept, that you're not just teaching children, you're actually having to think about keeping them alive and safe from a shooter. The same thing now in churches. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a shooter. It's the whole sense of people coming in to do, as you titled this, violence, and having a place where they can exert that violence and nothing happens and nobody does anything. And so as Christians, they turn the other cheek and, be peaceful and, accept the sinner. And so you kind of, I can understand, because I guess part of me feels conflicted as to how to handle that. But at the end of the day, if somebody's coming to harm you, or in this case, they didn't know those people coming in to protest, were they going to do, they terrified those children, like little children were sitting there and they sat next to the children. So anyhow.
Let me add something, because you've just brought up a point that I don't want to pass by on. On a Facebook post, I saw somebody make in reference to this incident, I saw somebody make the point that, well, this wasn't a violent invasion because no one was hurt. No, that you don't get away with that. This was terribly violent. The shouting, the yelling, the intentional scaring of people, and just the massive spewing of profanity of the worst kind. That is violence, particularly in the context of the body of Christ.
So the thing Megan Kelly was talking about is why the worship service time for people and the church building, the temple, the mosque, the synagogue, they're all sacred places. And so those places are kind of especially guarded by the Constitution, that you cannot go in and commit sacrilege to what that place is. So the just going in and yelling during a service was sacrilegious to Christians. It was terrifying to children, and who knows if some kook would have been in their midst doing something, or worse, if somebody sitting there would have responded and then something would have happened. So it was just a terrible, terrible thing, but it just seems like it's more and more, like you've read so many things that just happened in the last year. Some of them, I believe, have to do with people who become shooters in a sense, and they're full of rage that we would call insanity, which I would call covered in evil, possessed in some way by something bigger than them, to commit such atrocities. And they go to a place where they can spent themselves. Mm-hmm. But underlying it is the bigger thing of, and I hate to bring politics into it, because there's a lot of people who are, Democrat or independents or liberal or whatever you call them, and they're not these people. But there seems to be just such, like it's coming out the closet, the lack of having God in your life.
Yep.
Facilitates the lack, and that combined with the prevalence of growing up your whole entire life of killing an infant called abortion, or killing your grandmother called euthanasia, as acceptable, the lack of any kind of sense of life has value, or whatever you want to call it, but more importantly, the God part, there's that lack of stopping to have some sort of reverence or respect that's, for a certain generation, that's like shocking to us. All I could think of when this whole thing happened, especially when Don Lemon got arrested, all I kept thinking, it's gonna go on for a while, all the hand-wringing about it. But all I kept thinking is, just imagine what would have happened. Well, one, would they have? And if they had, what would have happened if these protesters for equality and justice and Don Lemon, who is out of the closet, would have done such a thing in a mosque? That's all I kept thinking was, and it's a place of worship, it's a place of reverence, it's a place where you don't do sacrilegious things. That's all I kept thinking is, even if they're complete, total non-believers and hate everything about God or religion or whatever, just the sheer thought of what would have happened in reaction to them would have given them great self-discipline to not go in there and do such a thing.
Well,
but Christian churches are a different ballgame.
Oh, yes.
And so I think it has a lot to do with the peacefulness of Jesus Christ and the lack of vengeance and all the things Jesus teaches, but he doesn't say don't defend or protect yourself, especially children.
Right. The weak and all that. And so...
And the guy, let me just
sure.
finish the Mr., what's his name, Graver?
Keith Graves.
Yeah. If you haven't looked at his YouTube, do check it out, especially if you're on a vestry or you belong to any part of the leadership of a church or you're just interested. Go. He's got tons of good, just ordinary common sense things, but makes the bigger point of how important it is to have something on the outside of the building.
Correct.
Making sure that it stymies or at least alerts on the inside.
Right.
And that is like we don't want to say that's how it is, but folks, that's how it is these days. Just like our kids have to accept the horror of horrors that off you go to school and you're worried about what's for lunch. No, you're having to worry about is the door's going to lock and are they going to stay closed? And I mean, it's just horrible to me. So Jesus, hurry up and come back.
Yes. Well, it is horrible, but it is where we are. And for right now, churches are in the bullseye. And as long as political leaders subtly encourage that behavior, there's going to be those who are unhinged that will take that as a dog whistle and go out and obey their leaders. And so the key is to be prepared. The key to being prepared is to be aware and to be proactive. And I'll say again, please check out Keith Graves' YouTube channel. In virtually all of his YouTubes, he always ties anything he's saying to the Bible and what the Bible teaches us about these situations and how we can be prepared and how to react. And so I can't, praise his channel enough. So if you have, and one other thought is always be ready to share the gospel, because you might encounter someone who's just lost, or you might encounter someone who, when you don't react to them and you look at them in peace, they may ask you why, and then you can tell them why. And there's always an opportunity to share the gospel. So if you have any comments about all of this or questions or anything like that, please drop those in the comments section. We'd love to see those. And if you like this content, I'd ask you to please hit like and subscribe. And Chaplain Nan, do you want to
He's
add
watching
something?
me intently, signal him. So I just wanted to share this. It actually comes from one of our great weathercasters who is so faithful to help people during tornado season, and it's a motto. So pray about it, take it home, talk to people at your church, talk to your people who can do something. Is don't be scared, just be prepared. If those people had been prepared, maybe it would have had a different outcome.
Exactly. And until next time, we ask you all to be safe, and God bless. Thank you for being with us today. Just remember, God is in control, and we know how the story ends.